Question 596. Which of the following would include a protection clause? A. Option. B. Purchase agreement. C. Listing agreement. D. Agency agreement. Correct answer is C. Listing agreement. An option contract gives a potential buyer the right, but not the obligation, to purchase a property within a specific time frame. It doesn't typically involve a broker's commission protection. The purchase agreement is between the buyer and the seller and outlines the terms of the sale. It usually specifies who pays the brokerage commission, but it doesn't contain a clause protecting the listing broker after the listing agreement has expired. While a listing agreement is a type of agency agreement, the term agency agreement can be broader and might refer to agreements between a buyer and their agent. A protection clause specifically addresses the listing broker's commission after the listing period ends, which is most relevant to the listing agreement. A protection clause, also known as a safety clause, extender clause, or holdover clause, is typically found in a listing agreement between a seller and a real estate broker. This clause is designed to protect the broker's commission for a certain period after the listing agreement expires. A protection clause ensures the broker earns a commission if a buyer they introduced during the listing period purchases the property within the specified protection period. This safeguards the broker's efforts in finding a buyer. This prevents sellers from waiting out the listing period to avoid paying a commission to the broker who found the buyer. Question 597. Broker Brian had an exclusive listing on an apartment building, for which he procured a buyer. But after taking possession of the building, the buyer discovered the furnace did not heat the building properly, although Broker Brian had informed the buyer when the deposit receipt was made that the furnace was in perfect working order and gave excellent heating. The buyer filed a lawsuit against the seller and Broker Brian. At the trial, the seller testified he had informed Brian months before the sale that the furnace was broken down and needed to be replaced. The persons liable to the buyer for the non-working furnace: A. Both the broker and seller. B. Only the broker. C. Only the seller. D. Neither the broker or seller, since the buyer should have done an inspection of the property before the purchase and discovered the faulty furnace. Correct answer is A. Both the broker and seller. Broker Brian made a specific misrepresentation to the buyer, stating the furnace was in perfect working order when the deposit receipt was made. Even though he may have been informed by the seller that the furnace was broken, his failure to disclose this material fact to the buyer makes him liable. Agents have a duty of honesty and to disclose known material defects. The seller had knowledge of the defective furnace and failed to disclose this information to the buyer. Sellers have a legal duty to disclose known material defects that affect the value or desirability of the property. Their failure to do so makes them liable to the buyer. While a buyer has the opportunity to inspect a property, this does not absolve the seller and their agent from the duty to disclose known material defects truthfully. The buyer is entitled to rely on the representations made by the seller's agent. The as-is nature of a sale, if applicable, typically doesn't negate the duty to disclose known defects. Question 598. Which of the following actions would not provide a defense for a homeowner against a mechanic's lien? A. Notice of completion. B. Untimely lien notice. C. Notice of succession. D. Notice of non-responsibility. Correct answer is C. Notice of succession. Notice of completion is a document recorded by the homeowner, or owner's agent, within a specific timeframe after a project is finished. It shortens the period during which contractors, subcontractors, and suppliers can file a mechanic's lien. Timely recording a notice of completion can be a defense against liens filed after the shortened deadline. Failure by a contractor, subcontractor, or supplier to provide timely preliminary lien notice, typically within 20 days of starting work or supplying materials, can be a valid defense against their lien claim. This protects property owners from surprise liens. Notice of non-responsibility can be filed by a property owner who did not directly contract for the work, within 10 days of becoming aware of unauthorized work being performed on their property. If properly filed and posted, it can protect the owner's interest from liens claimed by those working for a tenant or other party without the owner's consent. Notice of succession is not typically associated with defenses against mechanics liens in the context of homeowner-contractor disputes. A notice of succession might relate to changes in ownership or legal entities, but it wouldn't inherently prevent a valid mechanics lien from being filed for work that was authorized and performed. Therefore, a notice of succession does not provide a defense for a homeowner against a valid mechanics lien. Question 599. The following are methods of involuntary alienation for the transfer of real property, except A. Adverse possession, B. Prescription, C. Devise, D. Either A or B. Correct answer is C. Devise. Involuntary alienation refers to the transfer of real property without the owner's voluntary consent. The law or other external forces dictate the transfer. Adverse possession is a legal way to gain title to another's land without their consent by openly, notoriously, exclusively, hostilely, and continuously occupying it for a legally defined period. This process results in an involuntary transfer of property rights. Prescription is similar to adverse possession but applies to the acquisition of an easement, a right to use someone else's land for a specific purpose, rather than full ownership, through similar long-term, non-permissive use. A devise is the transfer of real property through a will. This is a voluntary act by the property owner, who decides how their property will be distributed after their death. Therefore, devise is the exception because it involves the owner's voluntary direction of property transfer through their will. Question 600. Which of the following is subject to control by a zoning ordinance? A. The type of structure that can be constructed on a lot, B. Property use, C. Building height, D. All of the above. Correct answer is D. All of the above. Zoning ordinances are local laws that regulate various aspects of land use and development. They typically control A. The type of structure that can be constructed on a lot. Zoning ordinances control the types of structures allowed on a property by designating land for residential, commercial, industrial, or agricultural uses. These regulations further specify the kinds of buildings permitted within each zone, such as single-family homes or retail stores, e.g., single-family homes, apartment buildings, retail stores, factories. B. Property use. Zoning specifies the activities that can take place on a property. For example, a residential zone might prohibit operating a business, while a commercial zone would allow it. C. Building height. Zoning ordinances often set limits on how tall buildings can be in certain areas to manage density, preserve views, and control the character of neighborhoods. Therefore, all of the listed items fall under the purview of zoning ordinances. Question 601. To ensure they are credited with a commission if the property sells after a listing terminates, brokers should try to insert this clause into the listing agreement. A. Safety clause, B. Contingency clause, C. Novation clause, D. None of the above. Correct answer is A. Safety clause. Contingency clause outlines specific conditions that must be met for a real estate contract to be binding. Novation clause involves substituting a new contract or party for an existing one. It's not relevant to protecting a broker's commission after the original listing agreement ends. A safety clause, also known as a protection clause, extender clause, or holdover clause, in a listing agreement is specifically designed to protect the broker's commission for a period after the listing agreement expires. If a buyer the broker introduced to the property during the listing term ultimately purchases it within the specified safety period, the broker is still entitled to a commission. Question 602. An improvement's economic life depends on the A repair policy of the owner. B. Improvements age and condition. C. Improvements use. D. All of the above. Correct answer is D. All of the above. An improvement's economic life depends on the owner's repair policy, the improvement's age and condition, and the use of the improvement. The economic life of an improvement, which is the period it contributes economically to a property's value. Consistent and proper maintenance can extend an improvement's economic life by preventing premature deterioration and keeping it functional and appealing to users. Conversely, poor maintenance can shorten its lifespan. Newer improvements generally have a longer remaining economic life than older ones. The physical condition, reflecting wear and tear and any deterioration, directly impacts how much longer the improvement can remain economically viable. The intensity and type of use significantly affect an improvement's wear and tear and its susceptibility to obsolescence. For example, a heavily used commercial building might have a shorter economic life than a lightly used residential one. Therefore, the economic life is a combination of how well it's maintained, its physical state due to age and wear, and how it's utilized. Question 603. In doing an audit of their lending activities, a lender discovered that most of its loans were seasoned loans. This meant that those loans A. had their payment due dates extended, B. were made throughout the different seasons of the year, C. had a history of payments made on schedule, D. had older loan recipients. Correct answer is C. had a history of payments made on schedule. In the context of lending, a seasoned loan refers to a loan that has been outstanding for a period of time and has an established payment history. A positive payment history, where payments have been made on schedule, indicates a lower risk for the lender. The exact time frame can vary depending on the context and the lender, but it's typically several months to a year or more. Here's a breakdown of what seasoned implies for a loan. 1. Established payment history. The borrower has made regular payments on the loan for a certain duration, demonstrating their ability and willingness to repay the debt. 2. Reduced risk. For lenders, investors, a seasoned loan is often considered less risky than a new loan because the borrower has a track record. This payment history provides insights into their creditworthiness and the likelihood of future default. 3. Potential for refinancing or sale. Seasoning can be a requirement for refinancing a mortgage or for lenders to sell the loan in the secondary market. A loan needs to be aged to show its stability. 4. Down payment funds. In the context of a mortgage down payment, seasoned funds refer to money that has been in the borrower's account for a specific period, often 60-90 days. This helps lenders ensure the funds are the borrower's own and not borrowed temporarily. In essence, a seasoned loan has a history that allows lenders and investors to better assess its performance and the borrower's reliability. Question 604. Which of the following would be an estate in severalty? A. An apartment building with at least 7 units. B. A non-profit business taking title to real property. C. A corporation with 100 shareholders holding title to an estate. D. 7 or more people holding title as tenants in common. Correct answer is C. A corporation with 100 shareholders holding title to an estate. Sole ownership is an estate in severalty. Even though a corporation can be owned by multiple shareholders, it is viewed as a single legal person. It holds title in severalty. The key insight is that a corporation is a single legal entity, regardless of the number of its shareholders. Therefore, when a corporation holds title to real property, it does so in severalty, meaning sole ownership by that single legal person. Let's analyze the options. A. An apartment building with at least 7 units. The number of units in a building doesn't determine the form of ownership. It could be owned by one person, severalty, a partnership, a corporation, or multiple individuals. B. A non-profit business taking title to real property. A non-profit business is a legal entity, and if it takes title in its own name, it represents a single owner. Thus, if the title is in the name of the non-profit organization itself, it would be an estate in severalty. C. A corporation with 100 shareholders holding title to an estate. As we've established, a corporation is considered a single legal person under the law. When a corporation holds title to real property, it does so as the sole owner, regardless of the number of shareholders who own the corporation. This is a clear example of ownership in severalty. D. 7 or more people holding title as tenants in common. Tenancy in common is a form of co-ownership where multiple individuals hold separate interests in the property. This is the opposite of ownership in severalty. Question 605. In an open listing, a seller promises a commission to the broker if he finds a buyer, without a promise from the broker to find a buyer. This kind of contract is termed a lee pendens, b. unilateral contract, c. open promise contract, d. bilateral contract. Correct answer is b. unilateral contract. Lee pendens is a legal notice of a pending lawsuit that could affect the title to a property. It's not a type of contract. Open promise contract. Descriptive, unilateral contract, is the established legal term for this type of agreement. A bilateral contract involves mutual promises between two parties. In this scenario, the seller promises to pay, but the broker doesn't promise to find a buyer. Therefore, there's no mutual exchange of promises, creating a bilateral contract. An open listing, also called a non-exclusive listing, gives a number of brokers the right to sell a property. In a unilateral contract, one party, the seller, in this case, makes a promise that can only be accepted by the other party, the broker, performing a specific action. The broker is only obligated to receive a commission if they find a buyer, but they are not under any obligation to actively search for one. The obligation is on one side only until the action is completed.